writer, actor, and producer. And with him, we have Ms. Sucheta Dalal, Indian business journalist and author, Padma Shri for journalism in 2006. I would request all the delegates to keep posting their questions in the chat box, and our speakers will address a selected few at the end of the session. Over to you guys.
Thank you.
Hi, Sucheta. So I'm going to start by posing a question to the journalist. We first of all, for all those who have joined in, it's been an incredible collaboration with you. I must put that on record. Making, during the research of Scam 1992, I had my eyes on your book since almost 15 to 16 years. And we got this opportunity to adapt your book into this series. And it's unprecedented success. I think, from the entire team of Scam, we owe that success to your work. So, I want to start by asking you about the book. Why did you write this book, first of all?
Start by saying, Hansal, you're not supposed to question a journalist, okay? But you have taken the opportunity to start grilling me. So, first of all, I think it's very kind of you to say that we have anything to do with it, but I think that the success of Scam, the series, is entirely you, okay? Every little bit of it. And yes, there was a base story, but, it's been 28 years. And I think the success and the key to the success is all in the adaptation. It's got nothing to do with the book. Yes, the book did well. And why did we write the book? I think at that time, it was one of the biggest scams that was happening. And we got a lot of offers. And we also realized, luckily, since Devashish and I were working on it together, there was a lot of time to discuss. And both of us were doing completely different kinds of journalism. So I was in the Times of India. So I was into breaking stories and writing something immediately. And he was doing the more, fleshed out think pieces and had more time to research things. So, and we had a great source. Okay. So all of us were learning on the job. In fact, I remember once I met the Prime Minister much later after the book was written. And, he said there's so many things I read in the book which I didn't know about. So I think we're glad that we wrote it. And we also decided right then. So while we were working on the story, obviously there were lots of attempts to shut it down, right? So she had a defamation case. And believe it or not, from the Bear Cartel, okay? And because he had a cover story which talked about the Bear Cartel, and Mr. Kothari had taken him to court, and the judge used to be a former standing counsel for the Bombay Stock Exchange. So we were really petrified. We said, this is the end of writing about the scam. And we were so stunned that he just heard it for a few minutes. And he said, in my prima facie opinion, journalists should be encouraged to write stories like this. I don't see anything wrong, because otherwise, how else will we get to know things? I think that's why a lot more came out. So then, obviously, it made sense to record it. So we in the book even as we were reporting and breaking it. And somewhere along the way, we decided early enough that we're going to talk to everybody. So as journalists, we were very clear. That could be one of the reasons why when the book came out, we have not had any legal challenge whatsoever, right? When you read it and look back, a lot of reactions are, oh my God, you actually name names. They say that about the series also, that you dared to, name Citibank and name several people. It happened because I don't think there was anybody who was not spoken to and who didn't have the opportunity. But, I want to sort of toss it back to you and say that I know that it's been a great challenge, because I don't think there's been a year when someone or the other hasn't approached us saying, we want to look at the book and, can we collaborate? And I think the minute they saw the complexity of transactions, they ran away. Okay. And I don't think it was possible in a movie format. So do you think the fact that you had the space of 10 episodes, didn't that daunt you? How do you sort of explain transactions in a manner that a layperson would understand?
This entire OTT has really, for storytellers, it has been a real boon. We have been able to, actually explore stories. And I'm so glad that in 2005, when I was looking for your number, I could not find it. Because, if it had been a film, I think a film, uh, while, we, in a film, we sort of sculpt the narrative to fit into 2.5 hours. It would have been very, very surface level, or it would have just captured a section of the story with a complete, faithfully. But this format of long form storytelling actually allowed us to look at, not only Harshad, but the world around Harshad. Because the show was not about Harshad Mehta actually. While we call it the Harshad Mehta story, it pivots around him as the protagonist. But there are so many characters at play. There is also the system at play. There is journalistic ethics at play. So all that entire the energy of that time and those days, I think this format has allowed us to do that. Yes, it was daunting when I read the book first. There were a lot of things that went completely. I didn't understand them at all. Particularly this whole thing about BRs and SGLs. I remember us, I'd made very troubled calls to Debashish, asking him to explain what it meant. And his explanation was very simple. And I used to always wonder, ki, Acha, is it that simple? But I used to, and we never saw physical SGL or BR before that. And but I think the process of understanding the system, understanding how things work then and how things work now, I think our effort in understanding that shows in the telling of the story, because we started working on the show as laypersons, as people who were beginning to understand this market. So our discovery becomes the audience's discovery, and sometimes it can misfire because it can look quite amateurish. I think what we did successfully is we sort of internalized the entire system, and a lot of credit goes to the writers who I know hounded you a lot, Saurav and Sumit, who really spent hours and hours trying to understand, decipher the research, and then uh, decoding it, writing it into, crafting it into a screenplay. So I think it was quite a mammoth task, but ultimately very, very satisfying. And I must tell you a secret. None of us understood the BR, the money market, till I think 3 months before we started shooting. We had put things in the script, and we were very confused that we have written all this straight from the book, but we don't understand a thing. So there was a friend of Samir Nair, who was a producer. So he introduced us to an investment banker who was around at that time, and he came to us and he explained it to us in, I think, 10 minutes. He gave us a overview, and that was when we actually understood. Luckily, we went into the show understanding what it meant. Because that was our biggest worry, because it was on the face of it, was very complex. But I think the complexity, more than complexity, it is a complicated system that allows people like Harshad Mehta, and allows successive scams to constantly perpetuate themselves over and over again. So it's so much more about the system. Your book also is such a cautionary tale, and in that sense, it is so important to have had the opportunity to tell the story.
Things that you have been mentioning is that after this, OTT success and scam, you say it's Hansal 3.0. And do you see that people are going to. So I have a question here. I'm taking over as a journalist, but the question that I have is that do you think that this worked because there was a little bit of softening of Harshad? So a lot of people like to say that, he exploited loopholes. Okay.
Right.
And I mean, I find it a little strange because fraud is not a loophole. A loophole is something that has been legally left open and untouched, and you take advantage of it. When you issue a false BR, that's fraud. When you do that SGL mischief, it's fraud. It's not a loophole. So
Correct.
why do you think a lot of people have? Yes, the system was terrible, and I know that this Harshad story is just about 30% of the scam. There were a lot of others, and I'm not even looking at the people who don't understand the larger context and have comments to make about why this one wasn't punished and that one wasn't punished. But
Correct. Correct.
where do you think people are getting the sense that this was a loophole? It was not a loophole; it was a
Yeah.
fraud,
Yeah.
right? So,
Yeah, I think
what
it
do you?
is. See, that's the thing about storytelling, that it is open to interpretation. And I think we nowhere in the show have we even used the word loophole. Harshad is very consciously uh, getting into this entire spiral of, this spiral of fraud. So the thing is, what we tried to do is to humanize the character, to show him as a human being with obvious flaws. It's like having an anti-hero almost, who has his own. I mean, he's a family man. He's all those things are there, but he's consciously. I mean, he perpetrates one fraud, thinking that he will cover it up, and that's the nature of my industry. The film industry is full of Harshad Mehta characters. So you do one scam. You so you sort of, and more than scam, it's like you get into a circle of debt. So to clear one debt, you take one more debt. To clear that, you take two more debts, and you get into this wild spiral where there is no return. You reach a point of no return. And so for me, it was a man who committed a fraud, but committed a fraud to a point where there was no return. And I think that's the underlying story of every successive scam that has taken place, post Harshad or even pre Harshad, perhaps. I don't know if there was anything of that magnitude earlier, but post Harshad, all these stories that we hear, it follows a pattern where somebody does it thinking that this one transaction you overtrade once, you will cover up your tracks, and you cover up your tracks and you think you can get away with it, and then you overdo it, and the next thing you know is that you are now flirting with illegality. And that was, I think, that was the attempt to show that, but to show a human being. I mean, I wanted it to be more palpable. There was no attempt, but that is, I mean, that is interpretation, because Harshad is seen as the underdog in the show. There's a human tendency to, and this is since time immemorial. You see, when a journalist friend of mine, a critic actually, wrote in her year-end list. She said, this is Hansal Mehta's Diwar, in many ways. So, Diwar, that Bachchan parallel sort of continued, where Diwar, you had a man who was a smuggler. At that time, smuggling was illegal. He was a smuggler. He was a gangster, and yet he became this. The nation cried with him when he slept on his mother's lap. So somewhere I think it is more a comment on us as an audience than what we actually set out to say. And that is, as storytellers, and that's the fun of telling stories, because everybody has a different makes their own story out of it.
So that, leads to another question, which is that because of the stupendous success of scam, a lot of people come back and say, oh, there's so many stories in the corporate world, and there are. And in fact,
Right.
them are, they're so bizarre that made it into a story and fictionalized it, people would think you're making it up. They're that bad. So everyone thinks that, look, okay, now Scam 92 has shown the way and all these stories. And I think there is a real need for the people of India to understand. We spend a lot of time doing financial literacy because people get taken for a ride because they don't understand the basics of how they can be cheated and what they need to watch out for. So my question then is that, do you think all these stories, if at all they're done, I'm sure you're getting approached a lot. I know I've seen all the comments of people asking you, what about the sequel to Scam and other characters? But is it all going to work for the public only if these guys are shown in Harshad was a very engaging character. He was a
Mm.
likable man, except towards the end when, the system finally got him down because he kept believing that, I will pay back and everything will be all right. And the Indian system does not allow it. I mean, the special court is open 28 years later, still trying offenses. I think it's a blot on our legal system, but it continues. So,
Right.
will future things work, according to you, in the visual space only if those characters are sort of humanized to the point that you have the Diwar kind of situation? Or if you really show them as negative, which, I
Well,
don't think you have done that even in your other series, but if they're shown as fully negative because they are nasty guys who have defrauded the system, you think it will not work and people will not be interested? Just
I don't know. I think it's a very broad question. I think what is important is to have an engaging character as a storyteller. When I'm presented with a work of non-fiction, and my job being that of dramatizing it, I'm looking for engaging characters. So if there is an engaging character, if there's a character whose arc, whose story gives me the potential for drama, then because the scam itself cannot be the show. uh, it is about drama. It is about finding the dramatic arc and the great and these compelling characters. And it just so happened that your book had so much in it. It had so many rich characters. It doesn't happen all the time. Trust me. In order to look for season two, we have I don't know how many books I have read, and it's a daunting task to find a character that is compelling as Harshad. Harshad also was sort of that he had the first mover's advantage in that sense, that that legend continues even now. I mean, so many people who were not even born at that time knew about him. And many people had their own Harshad stories. Now, not everybody. See, the frauds after that, which you have covered in your book, like the Ketan Parekh story, you was of a larger magnitude actually. It was much, it was again very serious. But is that a compelling enough story? I don't think so. I think it is something that Harshad's story will compel you to read, to explore further, as a work of non-fiction. I don't think it is a story made for the visual medium. So yeah, I mean it's a daunting task to find the second season, and to let you in on a secret, maybe we have found something.
I'm sure a lot of people are going to chase you for that. What about you? I mean, when you say Hansal 301, what kind of things do you have in mind?
I think the only when I said 3.0, it was just because I've been making films, telling stories for 25 years now. So and at every stage I keep reinventing myself, and I've been constantly flirting with for the last 10 years, trying to tell all these true stories, chronicling our times. uh, I think in Harshad's story, I think we found that balance. We found uh, a balance between telling a true story and between approaching it artistically and engaging with a larger mass of people. And I think that for me is 3.0, if I may call it. I think it was something I just said, uh, out of excitement to when the show did so well. And yeah, I mean, but it's, I must tell people that this doesn't happen all the time. I think we got lucky also. We worked hard, everybody works hard, but we got lucky. I think to starting with your book, and the fact that, I've been chasing that book for so much time. The fact that Samir Nair trusted us enough to make it the way we did it, because there are so much, it subverts so much of formula that we are told that a financial formula will, a financial thriller will never work in our country. So, which is why the film on Harshad Mehta never got made. There was a film called Ghafla which was made by somebody I know actually. Uh, but the wisdom is that it never works. The
It
conventional wisdom
depends
is,
on, I guess, how it was made. Because if your motivation is to whitewash a character, then that is not necessarily going to work,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
While the scam, every little bit seems to have worked. The music worked, the
yeah, yeah.
acting worked, the dialogues worked. So I think every little bit that you put
I mean, it
together,
was we took a lot of risks in this. I think, and credit goes to the entire team, the producers, everyone, in the risks that we eventually took. I mean, casting Pratik Gandhi as Harshad was a chance. There would have been conventional wisdom saying, "Ke, get a bigger star, get a bigger name to do it," and but
I think
somebody
that was
looks
a
like
big
Harshad.
risk. And I,
No, and
yeah.
that has been an old theory of mine. I believe that characters, physical likeness, more than physical likeness, you need an actor who will internalize the character and create an interpretation. Because ultimately, the audience is going to see the interpretation and not, they are not coming for a mimicry show. So it's a mistake that people often make, that you get somebody who looks so similar physically, but is ultimately just a caricature. But so all those things worked, and I mean, this line worked. Risk hai to isk hai. I mean, I think that's the motto of the show.
So, from our perspective, really risk hai to ishq means nothing, okay? But it worked, you're right. So, when we saw it, as you know, we hadn't seen anything. So we were so we are not even into binge watching. So we were doing one episode a day. And then we started getting calls saying, I finished watching it overnight. On Thursday night, we had half a dozen people who had sat through the night and seen it. So I finally told Devashish, listen, we can't do one episode a day because we don't know how to react to people. We'll have to sit. So we eventually sat and watched it. And every time we thought something was a little cheesy, okay, that seems to have worked fantastically. So, like, the RBI governor in Dharavi, it's something that you remember, I think we said it to you, but
Yeah,
nobody found a problem with it at all.
yeah,
Or some of the scenes with Madhavan, again, this is where I think your interpretation and skill comes in, because as a lay person and a writer of the book, I would have been so focused on whether something is, the way it should be or not. But you managed to sort of portray it, and all of those things which I thought people would question or ask. Maybe some people do. So there's a guy from the Reserve Bank who sent me a long list, including the fact that the spelling of the governor's name is wrong, and I had to tell him I think it was deliberately so. But other than those, everybody else seems to have found it work. So how did that happen? What's
I don't know. I mean, it's very difficult to. It's all on hindsight. I think what we did that time was we went about our work with uh, pure conviction. Yes, in the writing, we wrote a very serious and very well researched screenplay. When we got into the dialogue writing process, Weber, Vishal, and Karan, who did the dialogues, and usually in my work, I don't focus too much on dialogue. For me, dialogue is character. It's an extension of characters. So a lot of it is improvised. Most of my work. So here, Karan and we actually worked on the dialogues here, and I think some of the, and also you see there's this world is something I'm familiar with. Being a Gujarati, being from that world, there's a familiarity with the world. So I think there's also this sense of, I enjoyed recreating. Normally the representation of any particular community, whether it is, Gujaratis, whether it's Muslims, whether it is, Maharashtrians, South Indians, somehow that representation is very stereotypical. We don't. So I think we managed to go beyond that. So the lines also at times, when we would read them, sometimes Pratik would come up to me and say, "कि sir, थोड़ा सा cheesy लग रहा है. It's sounding slightly थोड़ा ज़्यादा नहीं हो रहा है." So I said, Pratik, it's in the way you deliver it. Uh, you know, Ultimately, it's how those lines are delivered. I think that's what worked for it. They
Which
were
one?
delivered. Lots of lines. I mean, there is there's one where he said कि success क्या है? Failure के बाद का नया chapter. So it was like, it's like a
I drop off? Or is it?
Yes, I guess he has had a bandwidth issue.
Okay.
So we'll just
uh,
give it.
take some questions.
Right, she's
Yeah,
back.
there, Sucheta is back. No, I think yes. So yeah, I mean, there were so many lines. I mean, even risk hai to isk hai was something that we, when we first heard it, we said, "Arey yaar, ye kaise?" It sounds so cheesy, but we made it. I mean, it worked. From the time the trailer and the teaser came out, people just kept. Whoever met me said, "What an amazing line!" So I mean, you don't know really what works and what doesn't. There were times when I used to feel, and trust me, there's a lot that we have already cut.
Mm.
Uh, and some of those things that you were talking about, like the governor's meeting, Saurav and Sumit actually had written the scene. They'd located the scene differently based on their research about the meeting. So it was actually set up in a different environment. Somehow, cinematically, I felt that it did not. Mm, I thought of a messier place. What if it happens in a place? In fact, it was a much more extended scene. It was a scene in which they walk past the slum and there's a shooting going on there because that was the year in which the film Dharavi was shot. Sudhir Mishra's film. So the idea was to pass by. So they passed by the shooting, and sort of Debashish looks back and says, "कि किसकी shooting चल रही है इधर धारावी में?" So one guy comes and says, "वो the new director called Sudhir Mishra. This film called Dharavi is shooting here." And this is अच्छा अच्छा. So they look at that and they turn away and they continue. So it was small homage. We cut that out. I mean, it became too much. The homage became indulgent. So we cut it out. But there's so many things that, but it was a decision that was taken mainly for the visual uh, medium without losing the essence. I mean, the idea is that eventually what we are trying to say in the scene, we should try not to lose that. Because otherwise, a financial thriller can end up being very dry. You see, and for the first time in my career, I've been reminded over and over again that it's very, very entertaining, which I get very chuffed about.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, in my career, people keep saying, "Oh, your films are wonderful. I very intense. I cried. I was." So the first time I'm hearing this, that it's entertaining.
But a lot of people are it after watching that scam series, and if they lose money, they quit also, right? Till now,
Then
it was now
I'll
you will
blame
have
it.
to.
I'll blame it on Weber Vishal, who wrote this line, "Risk hai to isk hai," and which has become like perhaps one of the biggest memes of 2020.
Yeah, become like a slogan, that they just
Yeah,
enter the market and take a risk, and I
yeah,
just hope that they don't lose money.
yeah. Well, I think it's time for you to start giving people tips that about how your. I think we have set the ground for your work.
No, we already do that. It's part of what we do in the foundation. But one of the
Yes.
lessons that nobody learns a lesson until they actually lose money.
True.
That is, when you lose, then you.
I must tell you, when we went to shoot at BSE, so we had an old jobber who was helping us sort of recreate the ring and helping us recreate that energy. So he is now a broker. I mean, for the 3, 4 days that we shot there, he hounded me and he said, invest in this stock. He kept asking me to invest in stocks, and I had lost money uh, when I was a kid. I had friends from the stock market, and along with them, I had borrowed some money from my father, and I blew it up in the stock market. On these silly, somebody said tip hai, and I put in all the money that he gave me, and all that money was gone. It was wiped out. The tip was a false alarm. And uh, it when I went back there, this guy's words actually kept ringing. He kept saying, "इसमें डालो, ऐसा हो जाएगा, वैसा हो जाएगा." And the truth is, uh, I'm glad lot of people from my unit invested in those stocks,
Well,
and they all lost money. The pandemic came, and not only did the market fall, this stock was an unknown stock. It had no fundamentals, nothing, and it fell very badly. So all of them have lost money. So it's a cautionary tale. It's in many ways, So there are many multiple layers of cautionary tales here that you just can't blindly enter the market. Even Arshad Mehta played the market after understanding the market. I think mm, he understood the market, and he played the market well. It's just his funding, his means of funding, and his manipulation of certain stocks, which was very dubious.
yeah, well, he had a better list of shares than, say, Ketan Parekh did because they had some
True.
background and some research, and some of them are still doing well. But of course, he got carried away because towards the end, if you're going up a lift and people say whatever you mention, chasing his driver to hear what he talked about and which companies he mentioned in the car, I think it's going to get to your head, right? We're all human beings. So that kind of adulation never happened before. As you said, it's never happened before in the market, it's never happened afterwards. So you had a few people who came up, but never this
Was
level of.
was Mazda the only stock that he really rigged in a sense? A company that really did not exist, or were there a number of such stocks?
No, there were a lot of stocks. In fact, Mazda is something he actually acquired. So
Right.
he took those two Mazda companies and he wanted to change their name and make them into Gromor. So those he acquired. And there was also a way of, getting backdoor listing by buying a listed entity. That's probably what he had in mind, which is what he would have moved to. But so many others like this Karnataka Bank and whatever, towards the end, there were a lot of them which maybe they could have put in a management. I don't know what would have happened if he had continued over a period of time. But even the manner in which he was taking public sector shares which were being disinvested. So the point that, the bank was acting like a broker for Harshad. So I remember writing about the first round of PSU disinvestment, which the government did in this ridiculous bundles and packets. So they had bunches of 4 or 5 PSUs into bundles, and 6 or 7 bundles were auctioned. And Harshad had bid for some of them with the bank fronting for him. I
Okay.
mean, all this was, it had gone to that extent. The whole, cowboy banking, as we call them, the lines being blurred between who was the agent and who was the bank and who was the broker, how money was moving into. So a cleanup was so badly needed because I think what they were doing to the system was pretty scary. I mean,
So,
imagine a bank fronting for a broker and buying shares. I mean, and it wasn't only Harshad, there were 4 or 5 of them who had bid. And so I knew these 2 bids are this broker, those bank bids are that broker. And there was a back to back arrangement that those shares would be sold to them. And the government was so stupid that they said, we're doing PSU disinvestment. We will not allow the public to buy. We will not allow the private party to buy. Only public sector banks will buy, but no restrictions on the public sector banks immediately selling them to private people. So you left a door wide open for this kind of, mischief to happen. And there was a lot of that going on. But remember, the country was just opening up. It's not as though government also knew how to handle deregulation, how to handle the economic liberalization. Everybody was learning. So,
But what do you think today after have we learned our lessons?
no, we haven't. In fact, we've learned how to manage the system because today some of the scams are much bigger than they were before, right? And nothing really stopped. So you have privatization and you have the private sector that moves. Earlier you had restrictions, you had MRTP and you had limits on how much a company could grow. Now they have grown into giant size by just sucking up money from public sector banks and privatizing it. So they've privatized national wealth and you're writing off 8, 9, 10 lakh crore rupees, which is going from the exchequer. So we as ordinary people will continue to pay higher taxes, will continue to pay 100 rupees maybe very shortly for petrol. And where is all that money going? It is going to pay these losses, right? So in
Right.
ILFS, which is another possible story for you to do, when an ILFS runs up 90,000 crore and it actually allows all infrastructure costs to be doubled and trebled so that people in the middle can make money. Who's paying for that infrastructure? We, because we are paying, higher tolls, we are paying higher user fees, you're paying airport entry fees, because everything is 4 times to 10 times more expensive than it ought to be.
Well, that's what I mean. A cautionary tale, but do we really learn? No, I don't know, and that's I wonder. I always marvel at what motivates somebody like you to keep uh, you know telling these stories, to almost blur the lines between journalism and activism in reporting this and fearlessly telling these stories, because it can get frustrating. It is nearly it's what, 30 years since the Harshad Mehta story happened, and it's just getting more and more complex, more and more sophisticated, and the end loser is the common man.
I know
Uh,
that is the pity and that is the frustrating part, which is that it's so easy to fool the common person and you blur the lines of journalism that you no longer know who's doing, motivated journalism and who you should listen to the extent that it's now frustrating because whether you write something or you don't write something, there are so many people suspicious about it, which wasn't there 30 years ago. And seriously, sometimes it makes you wonder whether it's worth the effort. But if one doesn't make the effort, then I think as a country we would be such losers, isn't it?
Correct, correct. So there are some questions that we have in the chat window. Mm, I think we've covered some of them. Mm, What is your thought process before finalizing a script? Do you think from the audience's perspective? That is one of the questions. And I mean, yes, the first, when finalizing a script, first and foremost, it is a lot about how much it appeals to me. That's why I don't write myself. I like to look at the script objectively. So with Scam 1992, I mean, we must have gone through, I don't know how many, over a period of 2 years, multiple revisions, and I would constantly just look at how it resonated with me. Can I see myself directing that scene without feeling uncomfortable? That is my first concern. Can I see? Can I when if I try to imagine the scene, can I see it getting staged? Organically. So for me, the key word is how organic is the writing, and that I think ultimately translates into the way it communicates with the audience. You cannot write a script thinking that the audience is going to clap here. A lot of us do that, but I don't do that. I mean, for me, it is I try to see how the script resonates with me and with the team. I also have it's a very democratic process where everybody sits together, we argue, and I uh, I listen to ideas, to suggestions.
So I
So
have
it's
a
it's a
question.
yeah, yeah.
You have done something so path-breaking with writing about a financial scam. I mean, making this into a really path-breaking thing. You've also done so many sort of biographies. Is there any other area that you think you would want to experiment like you did in Scam and you haven't touched it as yet? You said
Well, if you're
look at this book, so the different areas that you have in mind that you would want to make into a serial.
Well, one of the things that you spoke about also, I mean, that for me is it's dying for a more detailed, uh, the legal system, the judiciary and the legal system. I'm really looking for uh, a good investigative look into the judiciary. I made Shahid, I made Aligarh, both of them at their heart had the judiciary and the legal system. But I think in the long form, I think we need that one great, authentic legal uh, tale, something that deals with uh, how frustrating and also how rewarding the judicial system can be. It is very frustrating, but sometimes, even though justice might be delayed, if it is if ultimately justice is delivered, it's very satisfying. So
But
yeah, I mean, I
worried a little about whether you'll be playing with fire because we become very intolerant as a nation, and
yeah.
few people are so much at risk every time you experiment with a different genre, and people apologize. So judiciary is again a very sensitive area if you want to tell the truth and tell it like it is. There are other areas also, I'm sure, where you're going to hesitate because you don't know how it'll be received. Does that sort of cramp your
I don't
options a bit?
I don't think about it that way. At least I've never done that in the past. I don't know what the future holds in store. Every day you hear these stories. I think ultimately it's a lot about intent. That I'm not telling my stories with a view to titillate or to sensationalize things. So I think the intent somewhere has to shine through. Yes, it is difficult. The current climate doesn't let you uh, tell certain sensitive stories, particularly pertaining to religion, to uh, current day politics, to related to polarization. There's so many issues that one might not be able to speak freely about, or even give a point of view. Because yes, my point of view might be completely opposite the popular point of view. But I think as a citizen of a free country and as an artist in a free country, I should be able to tell those stories. That intolerance is disturbing, but I mean, I've navigated that so far, and I think I'm hopeful that I can navigate it.
And post pandemic, you think this OTT market is here to stay? People will keep watching because, for instance, for somebody like us, we have never watched anything in the OTT space until the pandemic happened. So I guess we will remain there. So do you see this as a trend, and people will continue, or will they go
It's
back to
a
theaters?
it's a very encouraging trend. You see, it's widened the um, the playing field for storytellers. So earlier, you see what had happened with the theatrical businesses, it had become increasingly formulaic. So a certain kind of film, if one film works, say a film set in UP, that small town romance, rom-com, with little humor, little romance, mm, if it has worked, the entire herd follows, and they make 100 stories like that. You're sort of constantly confined to formula. and that was somewhere straining the exhibition sector, the theatrical business, the monotony and the mediocrity that this kind of formulaic uh, stuff was giving rise to. Then one, there was mediocrity. The other, everybody became a box office, a trade pundit. So you meet somebody in a party, he will tell you, oh, that film did 100 crores, that film did only 30 crores. So the yardstick of quality became these numbers, social media, and in general, the reporting of uh, films qualitatively became about how much money the films made. Our awards also very naturally went towards what was more popular because they were televised events. So it had really, I mean, this pandemic somewhere, mm, led our audience to uh, towards very towards varied content. It allowed them to explore so many other stories, and I think that is here to stay. It is going to, I think these mediums are going to challenge each other, OTT, and because some of the films that were made for theatrical did not work on the OTT space. They were not well received, and I think it's a wake up call for a lot of that kind of filmmaking. That perhaps the time has come to accept that there is a uh, discernible paradigm shift in the way
What
stories
about
are
the
told.
discovery of new talent? Will, as OTT sort of, you yourself are going to take credit for discovering new talent, but is that also here to stay, a break from nepotism, giving a fair chance to real raw talent to be showcased?
I hope so. I sincerely hope so. Right now we sort of, as audiences also, we have our backs to the wall. So we really can't go to the theaters. We are not getting we're not getting the next uh, Akshay Kumar film in the theaters. So it is difficult to judge at this time whether it is if there is any permanence to this trend. But I do hope, I really hope, that the audience has woken up to the fact that there is talent, and until because they gave so much love to the show Scam and to Pratik, that from amongst them there has emerged a potential star, and he is a star because of his talent, not because of his surname, not because of his parents. So that I think he I hope that continues. There are many examples. Before we came out, there was Patal Lok, there was Panchayat. Two really exceptional pieces of work. So the other thing, the other big star that has emerged out of this whole thing are the writers. And I think the writers, not only those who've adapted, the screenwriters and the source. We've suddenly found sources from books, from literature, from modern day writing to adapt onto screen. So in general, I think it's a great time for people who write. Whether you're a novelist, whether you are a biographer, whether you're writing non-fiction, this is a great time because we are adapting available literature into stories. Rather than trying to make the same uh, formula over and over again. Six songs, uh, 12 dramatic scenes, five action scenes, 10 comedy scenes, and one long climax, and khatam, film is over. So that
What are you
formula,
working on next?
there's a lot. There's a lot, but yes, I'm actively. We've been having meetings on the second season of Scam, and that's going to be exciting. Hopefully, we have zeroed in on something. There are multiple stories. We've zeroed in on something. Hopefully, that we will be able to make that announcement soon enough. But yeah, there's a lot. Uh, at work right now. Many other stories to tell. And yes, there's one that I'm working on with a writer called Vinmay Lagu, which is looking at journalism with a little more depth. You're looking at the newsroom, modern day print journalism in little more depth. So yeah, there's a lot on the plate.
Great. I think we run out of time.
Yes.
I think
Thank you, Sucheta, for listening to me so patiently.
I would like to thank both of our speakers who made this discussion super exciting. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank our diamond partner Google, platinum partner InMobi and Facebook, digital growth partner Microsoft, omni-channel partner Zendesk. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you. Thank you, Sucheta.
Thanks. Bye, Hansal.